State of the Franchise, where we talk about your favorite franchises of all shapes and sizes. My name is Fred Dake, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, Tom Stadler. Tom, how you feeling today?
Hello, everyone. I am Tom Stadler, and Fred, I am doing just fine. Fred, I am quite excited for this week's episode because I got some feelings about dinosaurs, you know? And are you ready to get a little like prehistoric on this thing?
I'm definitely ready to talk about some dinosaurs. And there's no better person to talk about this with. A person. What? Why y'all laughing at me? Dinosaurs. It's in your blood.
It occurred to me. What's your?
It's in your blood. It's dinosaurs.
What is that? What is that character's name? Dr. DNA or something?
I know DNA.
Oh, that might be what I'm thinking.
The Colonel Sanders of dinosaur knowledge.
Yes, Fred, you're right. So this week's topic is the Jurassic Park franchise. We're talking Jurassic Park 1, 2, The Lost World, and Jurassic Park 3 with 3 claw slashes. And you may introduce our guest.
So, we were saving this guest for something special, and that's just what we did. We have Josh Randall with us today to talk about Jurassic Park. You may remember him from his episode on metal music, and you may remember him from the time where Tom and Josh came to my house and we watched Queen of the Damned. I don't know how you guys would have remembered it. I just wanted to bring up that we did do that and drank beers.
I was going to say, did you guys talk about that in a subsequent episode?
No, we were too ashamed.
Well, you shouldn't be, because that was a glorious evening. But thank you for having me.
I guess what we should say before we get in deep, originally the idea was to have Josh on to talk about new metal. So we had like a guys' night. I had the house to myself. My now wife was out of town. So I was like, come over. We're going to watch a new metal movie. And I could only think of one, which was Queen of the Damned. And the movie wasn't great, but the times we had were wonderful. But
yeah, I got to admit, I had never seen that movie before, but I knew the soundtrack was lit because I had the soundtrack CD when I was a teenager, even though I never saw the movie.
And I thought the movie had way more music in it, and it kind of didn't have enough to sustain what I wanted.
It was mostly just a lot of corn.
I love corn.
There was a ton of corn music in that.
That was the original plan, but we had to think of someone to come in. We thought of Josh Randall because this guy knows Jurassic Park.
I know my dinosaurs.
Yeah, Josh, want to tell us a little bit about your experience? Well, maybe start from the top. Were you like a dinosaur kid? And then at what point did Jurassic Park come into your life?
Dude, Jurassic Park made me a dinosaur kid. I believe the first time I watched it, I was far too young to be watching Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm pretty sure I was the ripe age of 4 years old when I first saw it.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. Were you like scared out of your wits when you were watching it?
Absolutely. I'm assuming I was 4 years old. I mean, I wasn't exactly a really robust keeper of timelines at that age, but I remember watching that movie, not in the theater, but at my uncle's house in Florida when I was a little kid, before I had moved out of that town in Florida. And I just remember being absolutely terrified of the T-Rex, specifically the scenes with the T-Rex at night, and when the T-Rex is like chasing them in the Jeep after they rescue Malcolm from the wreckage, and craziness. But I was a kid that watched many movies before I should have when I was young. Like a lot of those creature features Jurassic Park, Jaws, etc.
So did you have to like sneak around without your parents knowing and watch Jurassic Park, or were they like, we'll let you watch it?
I think Jurassic Park was kind of spoiled because it was at my uncle's house and like everyone was watching it. And I guess nobody was really thinking at the time that like maybe we shouldn't have our, 4-year-old nephew watching this movie.
Yeah.
Which, to me is funny now because I'm an uncle of twin nieces and they are like 7 years old when they first watched Disney's The Little Mermaid, the animated classic. And they were scared of Ursula at age 7. And I was like, man, I was watching T-Rexes at age 4.
And I'm surprised that they made such an impact. I thought you'd be kind of used to dinosaurs living down in Florida with all the gators. They're kind of like dinosaurs, right? Yeah.
They are. They're quite prehistoric. Yeah. I think gators and crocs have really, really stood the test of time. I don't think they've evolved very much from how they were back then.
Do you guys know that they would sell movies at Toys R Us?
Yeah.
And they would sell PG-13 movies, and that's how I got this movie, because I just convinced my grandmother to buy it because we were at Toys R Us. I was like, oh, it's dinosaur movie. It just had like the picture of it, like the logo. And I got busted because we were watching it.
Was that on VHS?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably black sleeve with the logo in like kind of gold and red.
Yeah, for sure. Like it didn't, it didn't look super intense, just had kind of the logo. And I remember being at home and it was just my grandmother and I watching it. She was on the phone with my mom. She was like, "What are you guys doing?" "Just watching a movie." "Oh, what movie?" "Jurassic Park, I think it's called." And it was, "What?" And I had it shut off. And I didn't finish it for another year. I was about like 4 or 5 too. So I saw the first like 10, 15 minutes of Jurassic Park and then had to wait a whole year to finish it.
Yeah. I specifically remember I was thinking I was about maybe 7 or so 6 or 7 when I saw The Lost World, the second one. And I have a distinct first viewing memory of that. So like with JP1, I remember seeing that at my uncle's house, which was probably on VHS. And I just did a date check. So that movie came out in 93 and I was born in 89. So I would have been 4 if I saw it in 93, which is what I was thinking. So if the VHS, I don't know when the movie released, if it was like a summer blockbuster or what, but Lost World, I remember specifically being at my cousin's house in Saratoga Springs, New York, in the basement, watching it with my cousins, Will, Helen, Vincent, and Elliot. And I just remember we all got the phrase stuck in our head, "Don't go into the long grass."
I always think about the Lost World that I watched the first 5 minutes of it at a friend's house, and then my mom came picked me up, and then I did not finish the second one for it was not a whole year, but it was like months later. So I could not catch a break trying to watch these Jurassic Park movies. My mom was around every corner just stopping me.
She's just like keeping an eye, like, "Fred, he's watching that scary dinosaur movie."
And now look at me, like I can't stop watching movies.
I know, you just crushed the Halloween trilogy finally.
It ended for me.
It ended.
I also remember at the end of Jurassic World, when I did watch it, it was like I was watching it with my dad and my brother. So I was like 7 or 8. And the end, when it's the T-Rex comes to, it comes to our side, it crosses the pond to the United States, it's in like San Diego. I remember me saying, "My worst nightmare coming true in a movie." And I just have that line in my head like that. And when I think back on it, dinosaurs were not something that super freaked me out. Jurassic Park definitely scared me. But for some reason, me just jaw drop saying that just always sticks up in my mind.
I remember just thinking The Lost World was twice as good, not because it was the sequel, but because it had not one, but two T-Rexes in it.
What about you, Tom? What's your earliest memories with the park? When did you open the gates?
When I opened the gates, probably very shortly after it came out. So to confirm what Josh suspected, it did come out in June of 1993. So I was the tender age of 6, or not even 6 actually at that time. I was 5 years old. And I remember it being too scary to go see in theaters. So I love dinosaurs too, so it was like killing me. I remember that I couldn't go see this movie. And so we rented it when we got home, or when it came out on video. And I remember watching it and just being terrified of the T-Rex and the raptors and everything. And I was like a huge dinosaur kid at that point. And after that, I was like, I was like, you gave me Land Before Time, and they had a scary T-Rex in that. Gave me the T-Rex in this movie, and Mr. Spielberg scared the pants off of me, and I was out. And I was like, I don't like this movie. I don't want to have anything to do with it. But then 4 years later, I went and saw The Lost World in theaters. Ooh. And I was like, I don't know that I loved it, but, it was something.
Wow.
And then 4 years later, Jurassic Park 3 came out, and I was like, I don't know that I want to see this. People are like, let's go see it. It's the third one. It's probably the last one. Went and saw it. And I was like, I don't know that I love that either. But I guess that was a movie. And I guess my thing with Jurassic Park, I recognize what a wonderful franchise it is for so many people. But I don't know that I've ever quite had the same amount of love for it that many do. I don't know if it's just because I got so scared when I first saw that first one that it just sort of like put me on guard every time I encounter the franchise. I mean, even the freaking video games, when they would come out and be like, there's dinosaurs coming out of the walls. But I guess it's just, I don't know. I like dinosaurs. I think Jurassic Park is a fine movie, but I'm here today to try and understand why you gentlemen appreciate the first so much, and why you think everyone else loves this franchise as much as they do.
Oh, that's almost jumping the shark there.
Yeah.
That you.
Oh no, we're jumping over the pterodactyl. I think.
Spoiler alert for the audience. Fred and I love the first movie specifically.
That's true, and I'll put all the cards on the table, and then we can move forward. I would say I love the first one. The second one's not good, but there's some stuff that I like, and some of my favorite stuff of the 3 first movies that we're talking about, I like the most, and we'll get into that later in the episode. And I think the third one suffers from being Jurassic Park 3. I always argued that if that was somehow just an offshoot dinosaur adventure movie, if somehow didn't have the baggage of the movies, it would be a great Joe Johnston, whatever it is. I don't know if he's got a T in there.
It's a T, yeah.
Johnston. Then he might be related to my family because we're Johnstons.
You find out you have a cousin once removed that's related to him.
Give me some of that I Shrunk My Kids movie money. But no, I think that third one would have just been like a fun action romp with like not all this hatred that the third one kind of has, which I think is a little uncalled for. But yes, I would say that it's not quite on the tier of the first one.
I think so. I will follow up and kind of echo your comments and sentiments there, Fred. Love the first one. Second one, don't love it as a movie in terms of its overall quality, but it's very nostalgic for me. And it still feels like it has a lot of great scenes in it, despite not being a great overall movie, especially when you consider it was directed by Spielberg. It's probably one of Spielberg's worst movies he's ever made. Granted, Spielberg's recent efforts have not been all that great as well. But the third movie, woof. Um, third movie suffers from a lot of things. I think it's one of Joe Johnston's worst movies, and I think it's just some of the actors that are in it. It's some of their worst movies, but I largely think it's due to the script in the third movie, to be honest. I don't think the plot itself is terrible, but when you consider that it is the third romp in Jurassic Park, and you consider that the character of Alan Grant is now like going back and getting tricked onto the island, like that makes sense. Like the first like act of it is good, minus a couple wonky scenes, which we can get into later. But the characters are so unlikable. Like there's not a single likable character in that movie, at least not to me.
That was something that I do remember picking on too, specifically, was that you have William H. Macy, who always kind of plays kind of a good, never like a straight on like antagonist, right? But he's always kind of a bad dude who's sort of kind of likable still, sort of like his Shameless character, right? And he's like very good at balancing that act where he's kind of like got that oh shucks, look to him where you're like, well, he can't be that bad,
you
right?
Gotta get
like
the true coat. I'm telling you.
And in this movie, I feel like he's just straight up kind of unlikable. Like I don't really feel like
very unlikable. Yeah, his wife Téa Leoni is very unlikable. Their kid is probably the most likable character, and he's an annoying kid. Like that happened in a lot of 90s movies where like in early 2000s movies where you have annoying kids that are like written poorly, directed poorly and whatnot. Like
I don't think I liked him because I think he was the bully in The Sixth Sense. And
right,
he doesn't really understand improv. He tries to talk about it. He's like, it's called improv. That just kind of offended me as an improviser,
Yeah. Kind of hits you deep in your core.
I was like, you don't know improv.
And like Dr. Alan Grant in that movie, like is like a completely, like again, aside from Act 1 where it's like, oh, he's clearly like got PTSD from his experiences in the first film, which makes sense. But like his character arc of being a curmudgeon at the beginning of Jurassic Park 1 and then kind of developing into this father figure guardian for the kids in JP1 is completely like absent and missing. And he has to go through that entire same exact arc again in JP3. And it's like, why? We've literally seen this character do the exact same arc.
So, and maybe that's something that I kind of want to explore a little bit too, though, is like, does how good the first one came together make up for a lot of the sins that some of the sequels have not really lived up to necessarily? Because I think there's definitely pieces of The Lost World that even when you think about it are like, oh yeah, you know what? There are some really good sequences in that. Like, I mean, there is something about that ending sequence when the T-Rex comes over on the boat and you're like, oh my God, this is like the terror that I've been kind of waiting for this whole movie, to be honest. But
some high stakes, yeah.
But then it kind of has Japanese businessmen running from the T-Rex in like a spoofy Godzilla thing.
Yeah, that doesn't age well at all.
Which I agree with you. Yeah, like they're like, oh, finally they're doing this thing, but then it's doing like goofball shit.
Yeah.
And gymnastics.
It's yeah. Oh my goodness, the gymnastics scene. Oh no. Like like it tonally, that movie's all over the place with like just being good quality filmmaking and kind of giving you still that shock and awe that you got in JP1 kind of all over again. But, they figured out ways to heighten it, right? So going from one T-Rex to now there's two. So, yeah, it's naturally even, it's twice the danger and whatnot. And then going into the the scene in San Francisco. But then, yeah, what we go from like intense Velociraptor scenes in the kitchen in JP1 to I'm gonna do gymnastics and kick a raptor in the face as I'm twirling on a bar. Like, kind of takes you out of it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that the franchise in general, I mean, even if you think about the way that Jurassic World kind of went, there's some pieces of it there. It's really leaning into like that corniness, right? Where it kind of jumps in and you're like, oh, okay, this is sort of goofy. I mean, even just the whole fact of like Chris Pratt's character in that. And I mean, no, we're not really going to focus on Jurassic World today. That's another podcast. But there's pieces of it where you're kind of like the what is it, like the pterodactyl that kind of picks up that chaperone and like drops
drops her into the mosasaur.
Yeah, like it's stuff like that where it's sort of just like completely unbelievable to the point where you're like, is this really like happening?
It's like the movies started to not know if they were supposed to be creature features, summer blockbusters with more action and more effects, or if they were meant to be like really compelling stories that happen to, bring in the magic of our imaginations around dinosaurs, these prehistoric, almost mythological creatures to us,
right?
That fascinate us and enthrall our minds. It's like each movie after Jurassic Park 1 had no idea what it was supposed to be. And I can only imagine that that's some level of muddling between production studios, deadlines and budgeting, shifting screenwriters, and then directors who are either fully engaged and committed to a vision or directors who are like phoning it in and getting a paycheck.
Yeah. Well, let's maybe dive in from that of how the production came together, because there's some very interesting things about how the first movie even got off the ground. So Michael Crichton, who wrote the book, actually conceived a screenplay around a pterodactyl being cloned from fossil DNA. And as he was kind of like working through this idea, he came up with the whole concept of Jurassic Park. Like, what if it was like a whole theme park based on this? So Spielberg actually learned that this novel was in the making in October of like 1989. And he and Crichton were discussing a screenplay that would become like a TV series even before the book was published.
Oh, wow.
So the
screenplay the TV series screenplay was a Jurassic Park TV series, or is that
They ended up auctioning off, I thought, to ABC, and it became the Dinosaurs show.
Is that for real?
No, don't believe my bullshit. Never.
No. So I think what it was is they were talking TV because they were working on a screenplay that ended up becoming the series ER, the George Clooney TV series.
Oh.
And they were talking about Jurassic Park, and he's like, no, this is a movie. So Crichton put up a non-negotiable fee for like a substantial percentage of the total gross that the movie would make. And then all these people bid for the rights. Warner Brothers was in, Tim Burton, Columbia TriStar, Richard Donner, 20th Century Fox, Joe Dante. Like, everybody wanted a piece of this action. And finally, like, Universal was the one that won the bid to adapt the novel into a screenplay. And then they gave it to Spielberg and basically inked him for that. So they put all their money on that being a hit, and lo and behold, here we are.
So
6
without
movies
Jurassic
later?
Park, Universal would be probably dead in the water.
Probably.
Very possible. They were very desperate.
Literally, Jurassic Park made Universal a juggernaut.
Like, I mean,
Yep.
I feel like E.T. was big for them with Spielberg. That's a Universal picture, and that's Oscar nominated. And I'm trying to think because that's a big gap, though, 87, 93. I'm trying to think if Universal had any sort of big, big movies between them, because that would be I guess, a big gap there.
Was Spielberg exclusively working with Universal for all those years?
Because that's pre-DreamWorks.
I don't know that he was exclusively. Yeah.
Like, was Jaws Universal?
You are correct. Universal did, in fact, produce Jaws.
Ooh.
Yes. So they have been working with Spielberg for a long, long time. Long time.
Interesting. But they didn't do, say, Indiana Jones, right? Because that was Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer.
Correct.
So he wasn't, like you said, he wasn't exclusively working with them, but it seems like some of his early big hits were all Universal.
Yeah. So I think they would try and partner with him when they could, because they would do a lot of co-productions. Like they did co-produce Back to the Future, also The Land Before Time with Lucasfilm.
Oh,
So
Littlefoot and Petrie and Sarah. It's the Secret Valley.
Yeah, I'm also kind of in that sweet spot of the 90s Universal. I'm seeing they have Back to the Future Part 3. A lot of Spike Lee movies, actually. I'm seeing like Jungle Fever.
Wait, have y'all done a Back to the Future podcast?
We have not.
No, we have not yet.
Got to put
One
that
day
on the docket. You got 3 movies to talk about there.
Also, but yeah, it looks like Zemeckis was kind of a Universal guy. So, like, I mean, Universal doesn't seem like they were in big trouble, but I am not seeing blockbusters on this level leading up to Jurassic Park. The last one I'm seeing would be probably like E.T.
Yeah. I mean, listen, from the point that Back to the Future was getting produced, I mean, all they really had was they had An American Tail, Land Before Time, Tremors, Problem Child.
Oh, Tremors is great.
Darkman, Buried Alive, Child's Play, Kindergarten Cop, Knight Rider, the series, and Backdraft, and Beethoven. So once we get to Jurassic Park, I mean, they're not making money hand over fist. I mean, certainly some of those movies did well, but they weren't like the big blockbuster that Jurassic Park turned out to be.
They're like adult movies that we don't get anymore.
Right.
It is interesting, all of the creature features that they do have, right?
Right.
Though, between Jaws, you could arguably consider E.T. a creature feature, even though it's like a family-friendly one. Tremors was on that list as well in Jurassic Park.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of how they made their money, though, originally, right? I mean, they go all the way back to Frankenstein, the 1920s.
Yeah, Universal
movie.
Monsters.
Yeah, Mummy. Like, that was all them. They basically kind of made creature features a thing in Hollywood.
I hadn't really ever thought of it like that, but yeah, you are correct.
It's their legacy, in a way.
Does that mean Universal was behind the Mummy? As in our mummy?
As in the only mummy?
Oh, yeah, it is.
The only one that matters.
I feel that's some chunk of change later down the line. And maybe another episode that probably has Josh on. How pissed would you be, Josh, if we did the Mummy without you?
I would be disappointed. I would be like, what friend do you have that you know that like cares about that movie more than me?
Who else did you let read from the book?
Do not read from the book.
Universal did, in fact, distribute The Mummy, the Brendan Fraser 1997 classic. 97, right? Or no, 99. I'm sorry.
Say that's later than 97.
Yeah. The
99 sounds right.
Their highest grossing films worldwide, if you want to know this. Jurassic World is number 1. Furious 7, number 2. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom 3. Fate of the Furious 4. Minions 5. Jurassic Park, number 6. Adjusted for inflation.
Fallen Kingdom is the one that came out this year?
That was Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's the third one.
Fallen Kingdom's number 2.
Was 2. And Dominion? Fallen Kingdom was terrible. Wow. Okay.
It doesn't matter though. People were pretty amped for
They
that
were hyped,
sequel.
so they went to go see it and realized it was terrible. But they already spent their money. So
Yeah, Jurassic Park made $400 million in the U.S. or North America, really altogether. Made $1 billion, even with its reissues in the theater worldwide.
you're saying JP won?
Yep.
Have you all read any Crichton books before?
I have not, and I've had Jurassic Park on my list forever, and I've just never read it. But I've heard it's so much more intense than the movie.
I'd say it's much more brutal and also kind of interestingly clinical with like the science. Like he's very much like how Stephen King describes Americana, he describes science. Like he just very like, yeah, they use injecting serum canisters. You know the type that come in the AB formats. Like he'll break down like all this stuff, and you're like, oh my gosh. But his like action scenes or thrilling suspense scenes, if you want to call them that, are just like very descriptive and gory.
Interesting. Yeah, I've definitely never read any Crichton, but I would be very curious to at least try and read the first Jurassic Park book. What else did he write? Now that I'm thinking about it.
He did like Timeline, which is a time jumping one. He has a disease book, like kind of like an outbreak style book.
Oh,
And then there's one
interesting.
more I can't think of.
Wasn't Paul Walker in the Timeline movie?
Yeah. I think Gerard Butler might be in there too.
That's right. I do remember this now. Okay. So, speaking of that, so after Jurassic Park was released to home video, Crichton was pressured by many sources for a sequel novel, and he had originally declined all the offers until Steven Spielberg himself told him that he would direct the sequel if one would ever occur. So then production began like immediately, and after the novel was published in 1995, Lost World began production in 1996 to start filming and eventually be released in 1997. And did well. Not as good as the Jurassic World sequels have done, but it did make $608 million worldwide. Around 229 million in the US. So not as good as Jurassic Park, but that's also Jurassic Park's including its re-releases in theaters. So it's possible they were actually fairly close.
Mm-hmm. I looked up Michael Crichton's other book
Mhm.
that I was trying to remember that was made into a big hit movie we all loved, Congo.
Oh.
Crichton wrote Congo?
Yes.
That's interesting.
I was always fascinated by it as a kid, and I never saw it as a kid. But then when I
Bad.
watched it as an
Bad.
adult, it was really, really poorly filmed. Like all of the action scenes are like some of the worst cinematography and editing I've ever seen. Like it's intentionally blurry. You can't see anything. Like when the albino gorilla is going crazy and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
like I'm just like, as an adult, I'm like, what am I watching? This is such a like poorly filmed movie.
Yeah. Congo was not great. It's interesting though to find out that's a Crichton screenplay, or I guess he's the literary source for it.
Yeah,
Goodness.
adapted from his
Didn't
work.
he write Sphere, which eventually
Sphere
they made into a movie as well with Dustin Hoffman?
and the Andromeda Strain.
Andromeda Strain, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my man
he,
writes. This is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
He also wrote the original Westworld novel or movie.
That was the one I wasn't sure about. I didn't see that when I did my Google, but yes. Which is pretty much just what if Jurassic Park but cowboys.
Yeah. And robot cowboys.
Pretty cool stuff. But you know what? He also wrote Jurassic Park. Doodaloo, doodaloo, doodaloo. Back on topic.
Did you just segue our podcast?
I was wondering about that too. So, Jurassic Park 3 began development originally was going to be called Jurassic Park Extinction, but then Universal decided
Better
to
title.
drop it and reuse it for Jurassic Park or Jurassic World early concepts. Jurassic Park 3, though, was greenlit in 1999 with a story by Spielberg, originally written, where Alan Grant was living in a tree for 8 years on one of the islands to study the animals. But at this point, he was not planning to direct it, so Joe Johnston rejected it because he said it felt like an episode of Friends. And nobody wanted to see 6 college kids on the dinosaur island.
I don't know. I like the idea of him living in a tree. That sounded good. Let's go back to that.
So Johnston never had any concrete concept for the third installment other than the start of the film would be more standalone and feature lots of flying reptiles. And we got that. We got the whole pterodactyl nest in that.
There are
But-
some things in the about like some of the dinos in JP3 look fantastic, and then others look awful. I feel like it's very hit and miss with that. Like, obviously, you had those like the evolved look of the raptors and whatnot, which was kind of controversial at the time. Not that, we haven't had controversy over feathers versus non and all that kind of stuff over the years, but like. I thought the raptors were pretty well done in that movie. I thought the pterodactyls were the most terrifying thing in that movie. But like there are scenes with that Spinosaurus that are just like where the way the camera angles and like the Spinosaurus up close, like the animatronics of it just look fake. Looks like B tier creature feature, like animatronics work and stuff like that, which it's such a detractor from like how good the effects were in the first two of like the main, like of the T-Rexes by comparison.
And it's definitely one thing that does show up, I think, when you do see the movie is it's a lot of inconsistencies all around, which is interesting though too, because Alexander Payne was one of the writers on that movie. And
On 3?
yeah, fresh off of Election, which is fantastic. And then after Jurassic Park 3 happened, dude goes, I'm going to brush that one off, go make About Schmidt or write Sideways. Very crazy. And then The Descendants, obviously, which was also
Don't
a big
forget
movie.
Downsizing.
I'm not. He also did I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, which is sort of embarrassing.
Wait, Alexander Payne directed that?
Just wrote it.
Oh, but still, gross.
Like, I know. I just don't get that one. He's like, it's like any other writer though, right? You just sort of find them doing like some odd projects over the time that they're like, why are they even involved with this?
Can I say something very on topic but off topic? I'm paying attention, but I did tell Tom in the background I have Lost World on. And I happened to glance up once. And I saw a car during the dinosaur in San Diego Park crash into a movie store. In the movie store, there's movie posters. And I did do a quick rewind. There's Schwarzenegger as King Lear in a movie. Robin Williams in Jack and the Beanstalks. Not Jack, the Francis Ford Coppola weird body horror movie. And then Tom Hanks in Johnny Tsunami, and it's just Tom Hanks' face superimposed on a surfer surfing towards the screen.
I like that you described Jack as a body horror movie.
It is. It's a body horror movie with Bill Cosby in it.
Yeah.
Just
It kind of feels just icky in that regard, but I don't know. This is why I'm kind of skeptical about Megalopolis. It's either going to be just like a complete triumph or it just feels like it's going to be really not good.
Yeah, Coppola's a guy who I'm like, he should have at least one more good movie, but I don't think he's going to.
Yeah. Which, if we're getting back on topic, it's kind of surprising that Jurassic Park 3, it just felt so inconsistent because Joe Johnston is a wonderful director. I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we even started podcasting, but you'll know him as the director of little known movies called Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, The Rocketeer, Jumanji, October Sky, Hidalgo, Captain America, The First Avenger.
Oh, Johnston did that?
Yes.
I didn't realize
Mhm.
that. And I love October Sky. What a fantastic film. Did he also do The Wolfman?
He did.
With Anthony Hopkins and
I don't
Benicio
hate
del
that
Toro.
movie, but I do hate some of the CG in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it has that Stan Winston. Is it Stan Winston or the Bark? One of those great makeup guys or visual effects guys made a great like Wolfman, suit for my man Benny the Bull. But the problem was they got scared, so they just went with the CG. So he kind of looks a little messed up. But there are shots in that movie that are gorgeous of like a dude acting as a.
I saw that film in the theater, and at the time, it was pretty. It felt awesome seeing it in the theater. I haven't seen it since though, and I was just thinking about it since it's October and approaching Halloween that I would like to see it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's stuff in it, but yeah, I think it gets kind of like anytime there's CG werewolf, it just looks like a garbage movie, and it just sucks because Joe Johnson is a dude who is kind of the master at effects that don't require computers. Like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is probably like a great test run for movies like Lord of the Rings, where they're using forced perspective and playing with what you're seeing on the screen. And it just stinks that like the movie's got a bunch of like CG goo on it.
Yeah, right. So getting back though to I guess the trilogy as a whole, and maybe even talking a little bit about the first movie, now that we've kind of gone through how all the movies came together. I mean, obviously after them came 3 more movies. We talked about it, Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, that sequel, and then Dominion. But focusing on the first 3, what was it about this franchise that you guys felt made it such a big smash success? Like, why did it resonate with so many people? And you can even speak from your personal experience too, of like, you know what, this was the moment I knew that this was a big deal.
I think the special effects hold up very, very well over time.
Mm-hmm.
Even to this day, people will still talk about how the effects in JP1 still like look fantastic. And so it's probably at the time was such a massive leap forward in groundbreaking, realistic visual effects for these prehistoric creatures that, we have only fossils of that existed on our planet billions of years ago. And the concept that, we could occupy the same living space with them was kind of really, really exciting. And to be captured in such a realistic looking way to where it was, if you were a kid, like I was, Fred and I were like 4 years old. You were like 6 or 7, first time watching Jurassic Park 1. You believed that it was real and that it was possible. So that captures the imaginations of kids. And then for adults, it was probably just mind blowing how realistic the effects looked at the time. I think you take that, which draws people in, but then you actually had a really, really beautifully crafted screenplay with characters that people could empathize with and care about, and their journey through that, through the park and all of the events in the first one enables repeat viewings and empathy with all of the characters.
Right. So a fun fact about that too, Stan Winston was the one who did the animatronics for the dinosaurs. So the dinosaurs only had 15 minutes of screen time in the entire movie, if you can believe that. And of that 15 minutes, 9 minutes was animatronics, 6 minutes was CGI.
Yeah, and it was like early CGI, but they were really smart in how they, leveraged it in terms of framing the shots and the lighting, to where the most memorable CGI scenes are the ones that are. I mean, there's a few where it's the raptors in the kitchen and whatnot, and a lot of it is they didn't focus the camera on directly on the CGI dinosaurs for long periods of time to reveal the deficiencies in the CGI quality at the time. So they used a lot of things like reflections off of like the all of the kitchen ovens and things like that. They used for the nighttime scenes with the T-Rex. You have nighttime lighting. You've got rain. You've got lightning and whatnot, and all of that kind of helps mask deficiencies in CGI shots as well. So they're just really, really well crafted, to where people didn't believe that it was even CGI, because CGI in 1993 was terrible. So, granted, this was probably the best application of it ever at the time. But like when you think of CGI in that era, think of James Cameron's films like T2 with the T1000 and the liquid metal kind of stuff. And like that was groundbreaking at the time, but that doesn't necessarily look real. Whereas the CGI dinos in Jurassic Park 1 still look real, the way they framed the shots for them.
Yeah, I just want to give like the shout out to like the visual effects properly, because I definitely messed up. Stan Winston, as you said, was kind of like the stop motion guy who was working with the effects, and then the makeup guy, Joe Johnson, the Wolfman, Rick Baker is the guy who I was thinking of, who's known for the makeup, who did like the Planet of the Apes makeup and the last, the Tim Burton one, which not a good movie but great makeup.
Yeah.
Even remember from like that documentary about the Jurassic Park making that, Stan Winston was making the stop motion, and then the CG guys were making the kind of computer drawing where they had a T-Rex just kind of walking on a loop. And at one point they weren't going to use the CGI. They just kind of shut it down, and they had all the big execs coming in to talk about the movie, and the CGI guy, what he did was he set up a big screen and he played his loop of the T-Rex walking in CG. So when they came in for their meeting, everyone was looking at it like, "Oh, what's this? What's this?" And then they're like, "This is the technology we need to do." So then he mocked up like a new version of it with like kind of the light effects, like you were talking about, how they had the rain, the nighttime, and added those layers in. Yeah, I know, like, that's like Stan Winston has that quote that when he saw that footage, that's when he knew he was extinct in the visual effects realm. But
I was waiting for
I'll
that one. I knew
disclose when
you'd
I
have it,
close out.
Fred.
But,
I think they were originally planning to do for the shots that they couldn't do with animatronics. They were originally planning to use like stop motion claymation,
right.
and because they didn't think that like CGI computer visuals would be able to stand up to what was needed. And there was that shot that you're talking about that they showed, and they said, "Wow, we could do this, and this will look a million times better than stop motion claymation."
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, could you
And
imagine if it was basically Jurassic Park 1 was Gumby? Oh my goodness.
well, like, it'd be more like Jurassic Park was like Ed 209.
Well, yeah, or like think about like the moving statues in Beetlejuice, or like,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I guess, like, I agree. I don't think the movie would be what it is today if it was that technology, but I definitely have such a soft spot for that technology. Whenever anyone talks about it, I'm like, "Hey, shut up. That looks super cool."
Well, like to find the 80s, right? I mean, it like
Right.
was this love for that 1940s, 50s stop motion claymation that had pretty much kind of run its course, in some ways, and then it just kind of came back with a fury. But yeah, CGI was just the next step. and it's just incredible. And I think one thing we kind of underestimate too is, Spielberg having had gone through the whole experience of making Jaws and dealing with an animatronic that also didn't look great by many stretches of the imagination. It had a slew of mechanical problems, that he was so well equipped coming into this movie, kind of knowing the tricks of like how to make a very menacing monster look intimidating without necessarily needing to see it straight on and it being like in front of the camera at all times, But yet, in those 15 minutes that we do see the dinosaurs, I mean, they do, as you guys said, look amazing.
Well, I do think, we talked about the visual effects aspect, but I think what makes the first one special is kind of what Josh said, where, yeah, you had the visual effects, but then having the script and characters, that's what makes it, you know, that's what puts it above the other movies because as the movies go on, the characters just get shittier. Like, one is just like a murderer's row of great characters that, if I pick a character, you can tell me all about who they are and what they do. In two, you can do that a little bit, but in three, there's just not much of that. And then the new movies, it's just like everyone's just cardboard cutouts pretty much. Like Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard, I like her a lot. I wish, she was gonna be doing bigger things with those movies just because I love everything else she's in, but I just feel the characters are just lacking, and even if you have the good CGI, it doesn't mean anything if you don't like the characters.
Right.
You know, I had mentioned earlier how Dr. Alan Grant goes through the same story arc in JP3 as he did in JP1. Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard go through the exact same story arc in all three Jurassic World movies.
History repeats itself, though.
Yeah.
My gosh. Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely talk Jurassic World one day. I think I still need to see the sequels to even be able to talk a little about that, but it definitely does feel like, you still get some very rich performances in the sequels from Jeff Goldblum, as Dr. Ian Malcolm in Lost World. And, I mean, Sam Neill and Laura Dern never phone it in, really, in Jurassic Park 3, but you can kind of tell there's just something off, right?
Yeah, but I would say Jeff Goldblum's kind of an Ambien pill in Lost World.
I was gonna agree. Ian Malcolm, it's Jeff Goldblum, so we all love him. But Ian Malcolm is written very, very differently and portrayed very, very differently in The Lost World than he is in JP1. In JP1, he's very quirky and enigmatic and charming. In The Lost World, it's almost like they were like, hey, we need to normalize you as an action hero. And like that's kind of how he kind of comes off as like this weird cross between JP1 in Malcolm and like I don't know, John McClane. like
Yeah, like I think the movie just would have benefited if he had like Ferris Bueller schlubby energy trying to handle his daughter and this stuff going on, and like he could have the arc of having to grow up because he doesn't necessarily grow up at the end of the first one. He may have a different his arc, I think, is a different understanding on the world that isn't such it isn't viewed through the lens of his academia. I feel like that's kind of his arc in the first one, and then the second one, I think it should be like he does have to grow up a little, but no, he's just kind of like you said, an action hero in it.
Yeah, he's like the protagonist vessel for the audience who's seen the first movie, who went on that adventure with him and knows that everything he's saying is true and is accurate, but he's like lost all of his characterization that made him Dr. Ian Malcolm in the first place. Because the whole movie is him being like, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't go here, we shouldn't be here, dinos are bad, the running, the screaming, the blood and, the death and the dying. And it's just him constantly trying to like fix the situation rather than dealing with any internal character growth or struggles.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, isn't that kind of what the issue is maybe with some of the sequels? And I guess I am thinking like further down the road too. Unfortunately, you do have to kind of just talk a little about the further sequels of Jurassic World, but it's kind of the same thing I think that kind of catches me up about some of the Terminator sequels too, is like, do we really never learn the lessons that the first movie is supposed to be giving us? And T2, I think, gets away with it because it sort of feels like a matter of fate a little bit in that regard versus, oh, we made this active effort to, warn people that this is not a good idea. Everyone learned their lesson. We're not going to make killer robots. But it's sort of like you have to think that people know about this Jurassic Park incident. This whole thing went wrong. And then they're like, no, we're going to go find the dinosaurs on the Lost World. And I was like, we got to go back to the park, in the third one. And then it's like, hey, we made the park now. It's open.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I do think that is part of the writer's fallacy to write this many sequels in this franchise, because at a certain point, you're, like you said, is like no characters are learning the lesson. Like it's, and that's where I think, like, for JP3, for example, Dr. Alan Grant has the same approach that Jeff Goldblum has as Dr. Ian Malcolm at the start of The Lost World. I'm not going back to the island. You're not going to no, this is a bad idea. We shouldn't go. And Ian Malcolm's hand gets forced, and Alan Grant's gets basically tricked and deceived, thinking like, okay, I'm going to get paid to do this flyover and like tell you about all the landmarks and the dinosaurs as we fly over in this private jet. But then he's deceived because they land, because they're looking for their lost son or whatever. And so now he's tricked onto the island, right? So at that point, no character should ever be like, okay, you fool me once, you fool me twice. I'm never going back. I'm not going back, right? And then, it's like Jurassic World. 20, 30 years later, we made the park and everything's fine. And like, that's the pretenses of Jurassic World, is that over time, technology evolved. And so they were able to make the park, and it was able to be successful for a few years. So humans thought they were in control of things. Mm-hmm. And then it goes out of control. But then again, you have the same problem is now in Jurassic World Dominion and in Fallen Kingdom. Like in Dominion, people go back. It's like nobody's learning. Nobody's learning, like, this is ridiculous. And then in Fallen Kingdom, it's just, well, it's chaos at that point. It's exactly what Ian Malcolm, foresaw. It's not just one T-Rex in San Francisco. It's dinos all over the world. And now it's like normalized or something. It's craziness.
Like, I was just going to say, I feel like there is room to have a franchise around a Jurassic Park. But I think I'm just piggyback what you're saying is they kind of just rehash the same themes and ideas every time. And the thing that makes Jurassic World, I'm sorry, I'm talking a little about Jurassic World, is that the best part about that movie was the Disney parkification of the Jurassic World. And that's what it should have focused more on and hit more for themes, is the excess, I'm spending $5,000 more than you are on your ticket, so I'm getting this, and what that means, what experiences you're getting, because I think there's kind of almost this elite tier, like TIER kind of thing that's going on in that movie that I'm like, that's interesting. Working your dinosaur action into that somehow. And then you can look at the later sequels like, oh, you want to talk about dinosaurs in the military? Let's make a movie about militarism. Is that a word? Militarism? Militarism?
Militarism.
Yeah. Militarism. Let's make a movie about that through the lens of having dinosaurs and stuff. But no, it's just kind of more the exact same ideas every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there, Fred. I wonder if, with Jurassic World being a Universal film, if it's too self-reflective of focusing on the excess and the luxuries and the hierarchy and tier aspects of guests at the park and all that kind of stuff. Because just like Disney, Universal runs theme parks as well. So I'm wondering if like there's a little bit of that, or if just and they didn't want to give themselves a bad image in that way, or if they just never even thought of it in their writers' rooms.
Right? I guess the movie I want is a movie nobody wants. I want like the margin call, a bunch of execs in the room debating like the cost of bringing the people out of the park, like and the PR around it. Like I just want that movie. All boardrooms.
Well, that actually kind of gets into something that I wanted to even kind of dive into with our coulda, woulda, shoulda is what do different sequels or what do different arcs look like potentially? I mean, what would you or could you change about this franchise to make it, a pretty solid one through and through?
I would say like less of a focus on it being the sequels being summer blockbuster films that have to have more dinosaurs and bigger set pieces and things like that, and getting back to like actual grounded like relationship based character
Sure.
motivated plots as opposed to just movies that are centered around dino set pieces. I think when you focus on dino set pieces and things, the dinosaurs behave less and less like animals or what we'd imagine a dinosaur or an animal would behave like, and they just become like these giant, like evil monsters. And then that kind of like takes you out of the immersion of it being a dinosaur Jurassic Park kind of thing that you could like believe is real, and just like, oh, it's a giant monster and it's a giant monster movie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like Jurassic Park 1, all the dinosaurs behave like animals, like wild predator animals and wild, like you've got carnivores, you've got herbivores, whatever. But like the T-Rexes aren't hunting the humans out for blood. The raptors aren't like on a murder vengeance spree against all the humans, but they happen to wander into their territories, into their areas of the park, and there's danger that lies within. But it's believable because you're like, oh, it makes sense. It's like if I crossed into a lion's hunting grounds, the lion might attack me, right? I'm a source of food, but the lion's not going to come hunt me down when I'm staying in my hotel or wherever, in the village outside of the prairie. But when you get into the later movies, it's especially like JP3, that Spinosaurus doesn't feel like a real animal. It feels like a slasher movie villain, like a Michael Myers trying to hunt them down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's some to harness is that the dinosaurs are chaotic energy, and you have to use. I feel like kind of what I was saying earlier. You have to use ideas and story things to propel a story that aren't just dinosaurs coming after you. They can just be the chaos wrought by the decisions made by the humans. The humans have to bring the story because I think then you're just gonna have like what the last few sequels were, which is just kind of boring dinosaur creature features.
Yeah. And I mean, isn't that something that kind of makes Jaws such a reflective movie, not only of Jurassic Park, but potentially like why it works so well, even on its own standalone? And maybe it's even its own sequels don't work as well, is that you have this piece in that could have been used for Jurassic Park. And the elements are there in the first one of like, you have the shark attacks at the beach and people are like, oh my gosh, the water isn't safe. And the mayor's like, no, 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 no. We need the tourism. We need the tourism. Keep it open.
We need
We
those
to do
summer
that.
dollars.
Right. And like, I kind of like that whole idea you were talking about before, Fred, too, of like the bureaucracy of like, Jurassic Park's open, but and they're like, oh, we're going to ignore the incidents so that we can get people in here and spend their money, like, and that's an interesting story to me about like what's the cost of human life, right? To make sure that you're making profit, right?
Yeah, like I was trying to think of that. It made me think of that Coen Brothers movie with John Malkovich. Burn After Reading, how the end of it is just like all the guys in the meeting room, just like, huh, so we're good then. Like I want that Jurassic Park movie.
Oh yeah.
It is interesting. I mean, so who, like, who are the villains of each of the Jurassic Park movies? Because I think more often than not, they are people.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jurassic Park 1, who's the villain?
Newman.
It's hubrisness.
Right? Yeah. That's actually an interesting thing. I'm not sure. I would assume it's Newman, Dennis Nedry, right? Like he single-handedly causes all of the chaos and all of the fatalities to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Lost World, there's definitely like the evil group that's trying to capture the dinos, right? So I would assume they're the villains. Jurassic Park 3, who's the villain? Spinosaur.
Greed.
And maybe the pterodactyls.
Right.
Like they're just inherently evil, villainous monsters that are hunting them relentlessly in that movie. Jurassic World, the villain is kind of half the Indominus Rex and then half like corporate greed.
Yeah. See, that got closer to what I was just talking about, though, too, right? Like Jurassic World, they're like, we got to keep getting bigger. It doesn't matter what the dangers are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they almost did it for me with that. Like, they just didn't have enough of that.
Yeah, it was weird because it was like corporate greed in the sense that there were like people within the park organization who were shady and making bad decisions. But like the CEO guy, like the guy in charge of it, was awesome. And he was like very much a protagonist character. And he doesn't make it. Spoilers alert. But he dies in a very heroic way. And you're like, oh, wow, it's like a billionaire CEO guy who's actually awesome. Oh, he's dead. But he dies in like a heroic attempt to like save lives and whatnot. But Jurassic World Dominion, which is Jurassic World 2, the villain is
3.
Essentially... Sorry, what? Oh, Fallen Kingdom. Sorry, Jurassic World 2, whichever one that is. Fallen Kingdom?
Yes.
Sorry. So good these Jurassic World 2 and 3 are. I can't keep the names straight.
It's like the new Planet of the Apes movies. I don't know which one comes first.
The villain are bad people again, because I don't know if you've seen the movie or not. Tom, I think you said you haven't seen it. It revolves around, hey, we went back to the Jurassic World Island to go capture the dinos, just like in the Lost World, but we're going to black market auction them. And it's very much like bad people at the crux of that. And there's greed and whatnot involved, but it's like really weird. And like I thought it was a subplot, and it ended up being the whole plot of the movie. I remember sitting in the theater watching Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom being like, so when is this subplot going to finish? We're going to get on to the rest of the movie. And it was like, wait, no, this is the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
It's this black market auction thing.
Do we ever see in the Jurassic World movies, does it ever get to a point where like we kind of get more of what happened at the end of Lost World, where you have and I think we said San Diego before, correct? Josh, you corrected us. San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you have dinosaurs just kind of like running amok in cities. Because that to me should be like the culmination of what all this is like you tried to contain chaos and it is just everywhere. Or is that Dominion?
That's the last one. There's dinosaurs all over the earth. So Dominion, yeah, there's dinosaurs so at the end of, and it's weird because this is wrought about by the decisions the protagonists make at the end of Jurassic World 2, Fallen Kingdom. All the dinos that were captured for this black market auction, they decide to set them all free.
And the
protagonists basically bring about many deaths and fatalities for the rest of humanity because they set them free, and that includes good ones and bad ones. It's so in the last Jurassic World movie, there's just dinos everywhere, and the villains again are like these are people, but also some of these like monstrous dinos. Like they've weaponized some of them, and then there's other ones that are just like evil, monstrous ones. But it is chaos. To your like kind of plot point, Tom, was like dinos everywhere, chaos. Like it's just these untamable forces, and it's that movie. And I don't think it's a good movie. Not because I think it's a bad plot, but it's just not a good movie.
Yeah. What I kind of though want, and I don't know if this is how it ends. I guess spoiler alert for anybody who really cares about seeing these sequels to Jurassic World. But like, and where I kind of would have liked to have seen Jurassic Park 3 even go is like, give me an ending that is kind of dour in a way that some of the endings are implied in like Terminator or anything of like, no, you brought back dinosaurs who were never given a chance to be the dominant force because they were wiped out by a meteor. You brought them back to this planet. They did not obey your rules because they are the alphas and they take over the world. Humanity's done because of your own hubris. And like that to me is like a fitting ending arc to Jurassic Park. Like we built a park. It didn't work. The park got overrun. The island's overrun. We tried to contain it. They made their way over to the world. They wiped out everybody. Here's your lesson, humanity in real life. Don't fuck with this technology because it's not going to work. You know, it's just something that kind of has some punch to it, you know, and even though it's always kind of dark to go down a direction like that, I would love to just see, you know, just sort of us getting popped in the mouth, almost like an environmentalist like message to it of like global warming, right? That we're just consistently ignoring at the highest levels, where it's like, yep, just keep letting it go. Let's keep building these fossil fuels, right? Like,
I think like that would be a good ending to the series as well. And I think they were kind of sort of trying to go in that direction by the end of the Jurassic World movies, but I don't think they stuck the landing.
The only problem is the audience really likes it when they get away and they play the soft piano music and they see like the dinosaurs from far and they look more peaceful because they're in nature. I feel like that's what people really want at the end of these movies is the money shot like that. I just feel like that's the ending of every Jurassic Park movie. The new ones are doing like they're like, ooh, just wait, we're building a world. But like,
yeah,
they're like, no, I think they think that we want it to have a happy ending, but no, I'm for Tom's ending where it's like a Kubrick ending or something.
Yeah.
right. Kind of like the ending of like Doctor Strangelove, right? A spoiler alert for that. Yeah, you know, you end with humanity getting bombed into oblivion while you have what is that? I'll Be Seeing You and all the old familiar places playing. Like it's a very dark ending, but it just sort of like kind of like punches the message that the movie's trying to say. And I think there is something about why that works for the first movie too, and why it does have that good punch for an ending. You know, and I'll say this: I didn't actually expect to do this and do a whole flip flop. Talking through the first one, I actually have appreciated a lot more talking about the sequels and like, okay, the first one actually does have a really good story. It is very well filmed, the visuals, everything. It's great. It's got a really nice, tight story, but yeah, it's the fact that you do have these sequels that I think it's just diminishing returns on some of the story in general that first one offered. So I don't know. That's where I've landed here.
Yeah, I have a coulda, woulda, shoulda. I wish that, and this is kind of leaning more into Jurassic World. So the last one, you know, we were just talking about it and how it was chaos with all the dinos all over the place and everything, and that it was basically brought about by the actions of the protagonists, the Chris Pratt, the Bryce Dallas Howard characters, at the end of Jurassic World 2. And in Jurassic World 3, they bring back Sam Neill, Laura Dern, and Jeff Goldblum, not just as cameos, but as like major roles in the film. And spoiler alert, it felt like every single one of them had plot armor, and it was just a nostalgic cash grab. And they all kind of sync up with Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard's characters. And it's like, now we've got everybody in the franchise, all the protagonists together, trying to deal with dinos and stuff. And it just, like, I feel like it's a missed opportunity to have there be stakes felt if, like, any of the characters were ever felt like they were at risk of actually maybe not surviving. And two, for them to not all just magically be supportive of one another's actions and motives and goals, because I have a feeling that, you know, the animal activist side of Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard's characters to like let all the dinos go free and then cause chaos on the earth would be very much against what like Dr. Alan Grant and Dr. Ian Malcolm and Ellie Sadler would be like supportive of. So it just seemed like it just didn't feel genuine to those characters. And I think like the plot could have been so much better if that last movie was like, hey, we don't all see eye to eye on this, and like we're not going to try to kill each other because that's not what our characters are doing, but we may not agree with each other's motives here, and like have plot and conflict revolve around that. And actually have stakes around not all of these characters are going to live to see the end of this movie. Like that would have been at least a better way to wrap up the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm not being a jerk to you. I'm being a jerk to the movie. Yes, adding conflict and stakes to the movie would be good. But yeah, like it is kind of just like well, excuse my French, a hand job fest. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
Everyone was just hooking everybody up.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I'm glad that we both had that same take from seeing that film. Like I didn't have high expectations going into it, but I had hope, you know, bringing those original characters back for more than cameos and having it be Colin Trevorrow who started Jurassic World, which I thought was a great return to form with the first Jurassic World movie. But yeah, like you said, it was just kind of like hand jobs left and right.
Yeah, and
So
you know,
excited to
I don't
see
want
this
to be
one day.
too hard on Chris Pratt because I know he was doing a lot of research and focus on his work for Mario, so I'm sure that he was super distracted working on Jurassic Park.
I thought you were going to say research and focus on dinosaurs for the movie.
No, he just really wants to make sure that the Mario performance is something transcendent and different. You know, he just really wants it to stand out.
Yeah.
Does he ever ride a raptor like Mario rides Yoshi?
No, but he does throw a shell at one.
Shut up.
No, he doesn't.
I mean, he rides motorcycles a lot while raptors chase him. So
Mamma
there's that.
mia. This is ludicrous. I like for how I'm like, oh, we're not going to talk a lot about Jurassic World. We talked a lot about Jurassic World. It's kind of hard not to though. Now that we've talked through all of it, because it's such a, it's really the legacy of these movies, which you know was exactly what I was talking about before. Of just there's so many things that connect back to the first one, and it's whether they all really lived up to it or not. But that being said, speaking about some of the good moments from it, what I wanted to ask you gentlemen here for our power rankings this week is to provide your top 3 most memorable scenes from the first 3 movies, please. We'll limit it to Jurassic Park through Jurassic Park 3.
Damn, all mine are from Dominion.
I really wanted to include that shell throwing
Wait, is that Jurassic World 2 or 3? Is it Dominion or Fallen Kingdom?
I don't know. I
We'll never
honestly
know.
couldn't tell you right now. I would not bet money on telling you which is which.
That's gonna be just like trivia one day. I want to be like, put these in order, but then that in the Planet of the Apes movies. Which one is Rise and which one is War?
There was one really good scene in Jurassic World 3. It's the only scene I thought was like actually good in that movie.
Josh, you're immediately failing this assignment. We're talking about the first time. Save it for off the air.
All right.
But please, Josh, lead us in with your top 3 memorable scenes from the Jurassic Park franchise.
Okay. Number 1 is going to be the very first T-Rex reveal scene in JP1 when the power goes out after Dennis Nedry takes it offline, and all of the protagonists are stuck in the 2 Ford Explorers that are on that electric track, and the T-Rex comes through from the no longer electrified fence and slowly just starts basically prancing around the Ford Explorers, and like the kids are panicking, the mirrors are fogging up because it's like a hurricane monsoon out there. That whole scene is it's so well done. I mean, even to the every part about it, it was just etched in my brain. Like when the T-Rex comes down and like drops its head to like adjacent to the window of the Ford Explorer, and the girl's got the flashlight and like she shines it on its eye and its pupils dilate like in response to the flash. Like just everything about it. Oh, so good.
So good.
So that would be one for sure. Plus that also features the lawyer getting eaten off the toilet in the straw hut, which is also awesome. The blood-sucking lawyer. So that scene for sure, just easily without a doubt. Number 2, the raptors in the kitchen scene is pretty awesome. Just again, very, very, very cool. And for me, number 3 is gonna have to be the dual T-Rex scene in Lost World with Goldblum and the guy who's up in the canopy tower, and then he goes in the Mercedes SUV, and then
Richard
he gets
Schiff.
eaten. Yeah, that guy. And like the giant weird like motorhome thing that they got going off the side of the cliff. Like that whole scene is pretty memorable as well for me. I would say even more than the San Fran scene, just because it felt more pure and a little less like popcorny.
Yeah, I think that that scene's kind of definitely looked over because Lost World just doesn't have the cachet as the first one. But yeah, when that thing goes over the SUV vehicle or whatever, I think that's up there with some of the stuff in the first one.
Yeah, like he has to do like the tow cable thing to like hold the big motorhome thing from like going fully off the cliff, and he's in that Mercedes SUV and he's trying to do it, and then the T-Rexes come and like basically tear apart the car and like eat him out of it and whatnot. Craziness.
Good picks by you, Fred.
Well, I'll do a little bit of echoing. I'll say number 1 for me is always going to be the Raptor kitchen scene. I actually remember having nightmares that were just me in that kitchen, and that was like one of the few times in my life where a movie really like was getting into my nightmare, and it just so tense. The reflection in the oven or whatever when it runs at them, and it's just like the reflection in the aluminum or whatever. I'll pick some other stuff just because, like, I'll probably just end up echoing everything Josh said. I really think the Mr. DNA scene where they're in the little ride and it's just
Dino
like
DNA.
Dino DNA. I think that is probably history's best info dump of exposition in a movie ever. It's like interesting, and I remember being 4 or 5 watching this movie and understanding on some level how the dinosaurs were made.
It is
like a very
ridiculously Yeah, it is ridiculously like identical to what you would actually see in like a museum exhibit about dinosaurs.
Right. It's so well done and it's easy to look over because it's just, them explaining how they did it, but it's kind of ingenious how it's made, shot, and just the whole thing where they're like in the pre-ride. It's like when I used to go to Hershey Park, you had to go on the ride where you were in the thing that moves, but just showed you how they made the chocolate. And it's just like a
Yeah.
video like, yeah, look at them. They're pouring the kisses now. Like like that's what it feels like. So for my last thing, I wanted to do a little something special. I don't do a lot of
Ooh.
preparation for these episodes, but I prepared this. I really hope I don't lose connection. For my last favorite moment, I just wanted to do a line reading. If It's kind of like a mini monologue for you guys,
Yes.
if that is fine.
Is it from JP3?
Yes. No, it's not. Here I go. We get in my zone. Peter, if you want me to run your little camping trip, there are two conditions. First, I'm in charge, and when I'm not around, Dieter is. All you need to do is sign the checks, tell us that we're doing a good job, and open your case of scotch when we've had a good day. Second condition, my fee. You can keep it. All I want in exchange for my services is the right to hunt down one of the Tyrannosauruses, a male, a buck, only. How and why are my business. Now, if you don't like either of those two conditions, you're on your own. So go ahead, set up base camp right here, or in the swamp, or in the middle of the T-Rex nest, for all I care. But I have been on too many safaris with rich dentists to listen to any more suicidal ideas.
That was very well done.
Awesome.
That was by
Roland Tempo
the
is my favorite Jurassic Park character in all these
he
movies.
is pretty awesome.
Pete Postlethwaite,
He's a
my guy.
great
Yeah.
the late Pete Postlethwaite. He was that character was such a good spiritual successor to the kind of game warden safari character in the first movie
Mhm.
who didn't make it, the guy who famously said clever girl.
Right.
Oh, way
Yeah.
to steal my first scene.
Oh no. But yeah, that was a great reenactment, Fred. That was amazing.
That
It was
is
wonderful.
probably like my favorite part of all the Jurassic Park movies, where he just like he moves the little screen and just comes at dude with his demands, and he just he just wants to hunt a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and he doesn't want anybody to know why.
Oh, that's wonderful. It was spot on too, exactly as I remember. So for mine, Josh mentioned it already. I do love when the game warden is trying to hunt down the raptors in the wild after the park completely goes haywire, and he sees and he's like, "Clever girl," and then that's the last we see of him.
It's game recognized game.
Game. Number 2. That guy's name is Muldoon, by the way.
Muldoon, that's right.
Played by Bob Peck. Number 2, I mean, it's got to be when Wayne Knight is trying to get out of the park and he drops the canister and then he sees the raptor with the frills and it shoots him in the eyes. And I just remember being so terrified when that thing just like just wild.
Good old Dennis Nedry.
Yeah. You didn't say the magic word.
Damn it, man. I'm tired of this hack of bullshit.
Hold on to your butts. Oh, man. So good. Sam Jackson, totally we overlooked the fact that he's even in there.
Yep.
But a great role.
First Sam Jackson performance I've ever seen and really acknowledged. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
I mean, what Sam Jackson movies am I watching when I'm 4 or 5?
Right.
Number 3 then for me is just the thrashing of the dinosaur or the T-Rex when it comes out of the boat at the end of Lost World. I just have this memory of watching it in class. So I saw it in the theater, and it had been a while since I saw it. And we were doing a whole unit on like you have to like offer some kind of like fictional piece of science, like, and you can show a scene or whatever from a movie. So I was in like a biology class, like in 8th grade or something like that, and somebody had chosen that scene from Jurassic Park: The Lost World. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is intense. And then just right as it's getting to like San Francisco, and I'm like, I don't know, it just stuck with me. And I just was so like in awe as that he's walking across. Is just great.
You guys keep saying San Francisco. I thought it was San Diego.
It's San Francisco. I had to look it up too.
Okay, I trust you if you looked it up, but for listeners at home, I was giving Tom the biggest side eye I could.
Now, is the sequel to Jurassic World Dominion, or is it Fallen Kingdom?
The jury's still out on that one.
Yeah, we are mixing up our stuff.
Are you sure it's San Francisco? I didn't see Monk.
There.
So but you really want to talk about diminishing returns, which was a theme we talked about earlier on this franchise. All three of us, our top 3 scenes were all from JP1 and JP2, The Lost World, the 2 Spielberg films. Granted, you had said from the first 3, but none of us said a single scene from JP3.
Tell me about a scene from JP3.
On the plane, when Dr. Alan Grant is being taken over to the island, before he knows he's being deceived, he falls asleep and he's having a little snooze on the plane. And it turns out this is a nightmare, and it was a very meta nightmare he was having, because while he was asleep on the plane, he believed he was in his dream, he was waking up from sleeping, and he turned over to see that the voice that was speaking to him was actually a velociraptor that was talking to him. And
okay, touche. I do remember that.
And then he freaked out and he woke up for real.
Alan.
Oh,
Alan. Exactly. It says the raptor says it just like that. Alan.
You know, I lied. They missed out on an opportunity to have talking dinosaurs in this movie. They just needed one, just like in Gremlins 2.
The biggest
you
thing.
see.
Or how about the scene with the satellite phone that they made a big deal about because it was a MacGuffin plot device earlier in the film, but then this like the Spinosaur ate it or something, and then they heard the satellite phone later, and they're like, why do we hear it? Didn't the Spinosaur eat it? And then it was the reveal that it was the Spinosaur had found them.
Yeah.
It's also
right,
got
Josh.
a really
Touche.
kind of underused Michael Jeter in Jurassic Park 3. Michael Jeter is the French guy from like Green Mile. He's the bad guy, Bud. He's in The Fisher King.
Yeah. Now it's coming back to me. I do remember him.
I don't remember this guy.
That
guy. I do remember this guy now.
Yeah,
Yes.
you would. I was gonna say, if you saw him, you would recognize him.
I totally recognize him. He looks related to William H. Macy.
Doesn't he?
Yeah, he's a great actor. I definitely liked him. He was Patch Adams too.
Oh yeah, another Robin Williams collab.
I would say I also have a distinct memory of disappointment that at the beginning of JP3 when they're like first running around the island and the T-Rex and the Spinosaur fight. It's like a very disappointing fight because you like we were all used to the T-Rex being the big bad dino, and it like gets its ass whooped by the Spinosaurus in like 10 seconds. That was a memorable scene of disappointment.
I'm starting to lose him now. Not as resonating or resonant. I'm sorry.
Do you remember the scene when they go in the pterodactyl bird cage thing?
I don't.
Do you remember
Of
the
course I do.
scene
Of course I do.
where the little boy is actually alive and he has a little hidey hole that he
Yeah,
takes
it's like a
Alan
little
Grant?
bunker. Yeah. And he like gives them expired candy bars. Do you remember? Do you remember the scene in Jurassic Park 3 at the end where Ellie Sattler calls in like the Marines and they arrive on the island to rescue them?
No, what?
Vaguely.
Are you just asking if we
Anyway,
recall?
so
Do you
that's
remember
the end
the
of our
scene where the
episode.
Spinosaurus is thrashing about in the water? And they're
Do you
trying to
remember
like
the
get them
scene-
as they're stuck in like a shark cage in the water.
Do you remember the scene where the credits rolled and it said directed by Joe Johnston?
So that brings us to the conclusion of our episode. We definitely appreciate you being here this week, Josh. But before you go, we would like to do our little plug segment and want to know if you have anything that you would like to plug for any upcoming things that you have or things that you have going on right now.
Ooh. Well, most weekends at the Interchange Theater, which is a local improv, sketch, comedy theater. We actually also do kind of all forms of live theater, so full stage plays and things. But most weekends there are shows there, which are fantastic. Specifically for myself, I do have a show coming up at the end of the month at Comedy Sports in the Garage. It'll be Saturday, October 29th. It is a Halloween-themed double feature, a murder mystery whodunit improvised show that I will be performing in.
Can
So
you
if you
spoil
like,
who does it here?
I have no idea who does it. It might be me. I won't know until the show starts.
Okay.
I won't know if it's me until the show starts. And if it's not me, I will only know what scene I die in.
They'll just have to buy tickets to find out. Josh, do you know where they buy tickets? Is it just on Facebook?
It is. It's actually at the door only.
Okay.
So show up to Comedy Sports at 7:30 p.m. on October 29th in Milwaukee, and tickets are $10. And it is a double feature. So there's that murder mystery whodunit Clue style that I will be in, and there will be a second feature as well that will also be Halloween spooky themed.
Well, it's a great way to spend Halloween weekend. So Comedy Sports, that ends with a Z. It's all one word. Look it up when you can. Fred, what do you got?
I don't really have much going on now. I'm taking a break. I've had 2 weddings and I've been traveling. I got a honeymoon coming up. So just catch me around, but definitely check out local improv and local comedy in your area, whether you're in Milwaukee or Baltimore. I just went to Maryland for my second wedding. I know that sounds so bad when you say it like that. I went to Maryland to have a
wedding. What about second
second wedding, and I ran into a guy who was a nice family friend of mine who was like, yeah, I listened to your podcast. So I was going to do a shout out to Chip. If you come around to the Jurassic Park episode, what's funny about Chip is he flat out told me that he doesn't listen to all the episodes, only if it's a subject he's interested in. And I was like, well, if you ever want to come on, we love to have new people on. He's a pilot from Maryland. He's a funny guy. He loves Austin Powers and Wayne's World.
Does he like Top Gun? Could you do State of the Franchise with Top Gun?
I bet he loved Top Gun. We didn't get into Top Gun. He did give me a bottle of Screwball, and it was kind of funny. He was like, I'm not even sure if you really know about Screwball. And I'm like, Wisconsin bars have this on tap pretty much now. But yeah, I'm going to shout out to Chip Route. That's going to be my plug. I'm plugging Chip.
Cool. It's funny. I was kind of freaking out for a second because I have an uncle who goes by the name Chip who lives in Virginia, so not far from Maryland.
Nice.
And he also was a pilot in the Navy. So I was like,
wow.
I'm like, this is not the same guy because my uncle's like in his 50s or 60s now. But,
Maybe they're from the same block.
they're a chip off the old block, what you say?
Hey.
It was pretty funny though. I had my best man there who also listens to our podcast, Steve. I'm going to give another shout out there. Steve
Great.
listens to our podcast, big fan. And I was at the wedding and I introduced Steve and Chip as, you guys might have a lot in common. And one thing that you have in common is you both are big fans of my podcast. And they ended up sitting together the rest of the night, so it worked out.
That's so cool. I love it. Well, great. It's always great to shout out our listeners and our guests too. For this week, I'm going to do a special plug for a friend of the podcast, Jasmine Gonzalez. She is raising money for her family right now. Her dad and her dog, family dog, have gone through a tough time. So they're looking to raise some money to help some hospital bills that they're doing. The dog needs surgery. Her dad's recovering from an emergency incident. He's doing better now, but could definitely use your help. Look up GoFundMe.com/F as in Frank /cover Louise and Paloma's medical costs. We'll list a link in the episode or in our link tree. So please, consider donating to their cause. Really means a lot to us, and we're hoping to have Jasmine back on an episode again very soon. But that doesn't take away from our guest today, Josh Randall. Thank you so much for stepping in, Josh, and being an awesome guest this week. Really appreciate you being on the show. And stay tuned for next time. We'll be discussing, we'll be having our first annual Halloween special is really what we'll be doing.
Yeah, I like the sound of that.
And if you've been following the show for a while or listened to any episodes, you will know that Fred and I are quite big fans of the horror genre. So we're very excited to discuss a lot of things about Halloween. Not just the movies, but Halloween, the holiday.
Yeah, and if you are a listener and that sounds really fun to you, I'd recommend hopping on your streaming services and checking out some of the Halloween fare, because I am definitely making it a point to watch as much of it as I can. I know Tom and I are both horror fans, but I think I get in there into the deep nitty gritty more than he does. So between the two of us, we're going to cover a lot of stuff. And I just think there's some good stuff out there, especially on Netflix. Mike Flanagan's got a new show. Hocus Pocus 2 apparently is watchable. I haven't seen it yet. That's something I'm going to go bug my wife right now. I'm going to poke her, be like, can we watch Hocus Pocus 2? Are you still awake?
Yeah, it'll be good. If you have any movies that you've seen this year, any of the horror genre, Halloween themed that you want to shout out, or if you have any scary stories you want to tell us, honestly, or if you just love Halloween, tell us how much you love Halloween. Send us an email at stateofthefranchisepodcast@gmail.com and make sure to write and review us. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. You obviously found us on a podcast, so that service is perfectly fine to write us a review or send us a little rating. 5 stars is always great. And thanks again to Josh, and thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Do you remember the scene where Joe Johnston's name appears in the credits, as Fred just alluded to, and it had a T in it, so you knew it was John Stun and not John Sun?
Remember when the end credits of Jurassic Park 3 had the MPAA stamp, so you knew you were watching a legal copy of a film? You remember when you watched Jurassic Park 3?
All right.
And the HBO Max, you should watch Jurassic World Next comes up.
Oh my God.